All right, we're back with part two of Michele Wallace's Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. We just finished with introduction and part one, Black Macho. Now we're on the second and final part, which is the myth of the Superwoman. So Wallace starts out talking about the stress of self-sufficiency and individual survival for as a Black woman from female relatives, and how that sensationalized the Black women labor of Black women. So it's like Black women only can support themselves or something like that. So it's like it's understanding because of um of what Black men and white supremacy has been done to the plight of Black women. But it also there's also stereotypes that come along with it, like Aunt Jemima or something like that. So that's kind of like, so if y'all know about the Aunt Jemima syrup, how that's being pushed to be problematic. Michele Wallace also critiqued the Aunt Jemima caricature on this in this section, and how it's like this lack of community that Wallace was trying to call for, that the Black women in her lives weren't showing can be possible, because it's literally, you're gonna need people throughout life. Like, you can't just rely on yourself to do everything. You can like do things to like in the sense of control or something like that. You can control um what your activities and stuff like that. What support can you give? Like that's something that you can do. But there's it's like this fine line between it's this line between self love and self care and love for others and community. So it's like literally sometimes you can't put yourself above others' needs, but it's showing how care isn't considered in the her life and her upbringing. And for example, her mom, Faith Ringgold, is an artist, and she talked about how her mother put her in this was this violin or music lesson, and then and then her mom was asking that her teacher, how's my daughter doing, do you see a future with her? And the teacher said no. And then Faith Ringgold took her daughter out of that music lesson, and didn't see like Wallace could just needed some practice or something like that. So it's like this you need to find your passion right away, just like that. Like she's not given time to actually polish the work that she needs to do, and Wallace brought that attention up. And she sees how in 1960, and she talked about in 1968 how there were divisions among the Black community. Like it strengthened the divisions because Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated that day, and how it's a lot of riots that came out after his assassination. And it also it's like we can't unify like we used to with the civil rights movement anymore. So uh it's like this back this reaction that talks about the Black bourgeoisie. And there's like these sections within the Black community. Like there's a section of the Black community that's focused on Black Power movement, and there's a section of the Black community that's Black bourgeoisie. There's a section of the Black community that's focused on Black businesses, and it's like it's cool to have like this diversity, but it's like there's this hostility towards each other, and it's contributing to the oppression that white people put on us, and it's not going to end if we continue maintaining these divisions. And she talks about the achievement standards that were perpetrated by her mom and her aunts and other black women, like going to college and stuff like that. How that's been seen as important. Like you have to go to college, get an education and stuff like that. Even though not everyone has that luxury, like you're still a human being if you don't go to college. But it also perpetuates this strong black woman stereotype, and she talked more about it on page 95. She Yeah, she said it made me cringe to hear men refer to me as strong because I knew they were referring to the historical me, the monolithic me, the invincible black woman who made their penises shrivel up into their bellies, who reminded them they had no power to control their own destinies, much less hers, who made them loathe and want to destroy that woman, never realizing how imaginary my strength really was. I swore never use it. So we had the when it comes to studying black women, some people just idolize black women, like they deify them, even that goes against everything against their politics. Like with Angela Davis, for example, she's everyone, and like even I agree, like she's like one of the most brilliant intellectuals that people need to study and learn. But Angela Davis also encourages people to disagree with her. Like she's not always going to get it right. She's a human being. Like people praise her strength and her bravery when she was incarcerated. But Angela Davis talks about, I was scared. Like there was talks about putting me in a gas chamber and the death penalty and capital punishments. Like I had fears, and there was many times where there was a good opportunity that I was gonna die. But and that put some trauma into Angela Davis. So we shouldn't fetishize those acts of resilience. Like not a lot of people are willing to do that, and there should be no shame within it too. And that's literally what Wallace was talking about. And then she was talking about her experience in a commune and shelter, and how the structure that she was going through in her household, like being care for yourself, it motivated her to go to it was either in Mexico or Guatemala to, I think she was studying abroad or something, and she was going to Latin America, and she was in this commune. So for those who don't know what a commune is, it is when every member of the household, they have like equal and equitable duties and responsibilities when it comes to the house. Like someone takes cooks, someone cleans the kitchen, someone cleans everything, someone probably mows the lawn, someone, it's like a regular household, but there's like a radical politics within it, because it's like everyone there's support whenever you go. And that's what Wallace got to experience. And I think it was either Guatemala or Mexico. And how she talked about, it was this liberating feeling that she got, because she was also talking about when she was smoking weed, and it got to the point where it's unhealthy. And she eventually left that commune. And she was also talking about how the luxury of running away, because she was trying to run away from home because of the stress in the household and the toxicity. And she was talking about how there are disparities between black girls and white girls when they're running away. How it was in page 99 that I didn't get to think about. She said, back in 1969, record numbers of white girls were running away from home, and it made big news, but many more black girls were running away. Running away is a uniquely juvenile and mostly female crime. As with most crimes, you are usually incarcerated for it only if you're poor, black, and you're criminalized. And it criminalizes not even just the child, but the mother too. And when a middle class child runs away and is picked up, the courts will usually let her parents take her back if they are willing. But if a child has committed previous offenses, and such a child tends to come from a home where the mother has no husband, and there are a lot of other children where the income is scanty and are provided by public assistance, the child is institutionalized. So, coming from a middle class background and being a black woman, Wallace, when she was put into this Catholic residence, and that they were trying to put structure into Wallace, and she was there for say 6 months. She wasn't there too long, and she was talking about this respectability politics that was promoted in Catholic institutions. Like you can't get married, you can't have sex before you get married, and you're villainized and ostracized for that, for example. And she was talking about her experience there, and how she was a radicalized child. Like, she was seen as rebellious, and she was talking about making speeches about capitalism and stuff like that. That it was a detriment to her mental health. But then there was this woman named Sister Gertrude. So it was one of the nuns in the Catholic facility who gave her a space to be comfortable and feel liberated and free. That she's free to talk to Sister Gertrude. She was like a mentor to Michele. Like, she made Michele organize trips and stuff like that. So she has this she got a sense of pleasure even being in this Catholic facility. And she was talking about the girls that were in the facility, and how they entered, and like it's a cycle of girls going into and out of that Catholic facility. So it's like the cycle of incarceration that I was talking about in Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, how they leave the facility and there's no support system, and they ended up going back into the facility. And Wallace talked about this on pages 104 to 106. She said, "One of the things I knew by the time I left the residence was that many of the girls there would not survive, or rather they would survive, but they would never really live. They were locked into the pattern, sealed into the little niche society had prepared for them, labeled girls who do not know how to behave. Already their concept of themselves was too low. They saw any kindness to them as weakness. They seemed to wait for some male to take charge of their lives, and when there was no such male around, they stopped living, they went. Wherever the tide swept them, they were in limbo." So it was talking about how the lack of male presence contributed to these um these girls going into these types of institutions. And it was even to the extreme where the girls were waiting for like a boyfriend to come back home from prison, like waiting for a man to provide, get back the security that they strived and desired. And yeah, she said, "On a recent visit to the residence, a black girl of 16 told me gleefully of how she had run away with her boyfriend of 17 who had robbed a bank. They had used the money to work their way across the country partying. He was in Spofford serving a team of 18 months. She was getting out in a few weeks. I asked her what was she going to do when she got out. I'm going to wait for my boyfriend. You can't spend 18 months just waiting." I said, and the other girls laughed nervously. "What else are you going to do?" "I'm going to stay high," she said blankly. According to her society's oldest, most strictly enforced rules, she wasn't wrong. She was following the real prescription for womanhood. First, she'd found the man around her. She had the most money and attached herself to him. Since he'd been detained, she would go into hibernation until he returned. Her life began and ended with him, belonged to him, even though he was only a child himself. He determined her moral character. If he had none, she had none. So that's kind of similar to the black man, white woman dichotomy that she was talking about in the Black Macho section. How black women were told to wait for a black man and give them security. And yeah, so it's like, because it's like the residence was also operating like a prison. And it's talking about how even outside of the prison industrial complex, like something like this, where social workers are involved, therapists are involved, operates like a prison. So you have to not even just talking about divesting from the prison industrial complex, but you also have to talk about these other resources and how they shouldn't operate as the feds and the ops. And yeah, so she said, in the girls I met at the residence, I could see generation after generation stretched out into infinity of hungry, brutalized, illiterate children, born of children. Black women have never listened to their mothers. No black woman ever pays much attention to any other black woman. And so each one starts out fresh as if no black woman had ever tried to live before. The black movement was unable to provide me with the language I needed to discuss these matters. I had no alternative but to become a feminist. So that's how a lot of black women, they entered into black feminism, and how black feminism became black feminism that we know today. And then she talked about the stereotypes of the sapphire, which is this angry black woman, how black women are always angry, even though there may be valid reasons why they're angry, and they're always loud, and they're violent and hyper masculine and stuff like that. And that also goes into the mammy stereotype. And she talked about how from the intricate web of mythology which surrounds the black woman, a fundamental image emerges. It is of a woman of inordinate strength with an ability for tolerating an unusual amount of misery and heavy, distasteful work. This woman does not have the same fears, weaknesses, and insecurities as other women, but believes herself to be and is in fact stronger emotionally than most men. Less of a woman in that she is less feminine and helpless. She is really more of a woman in that she is the embodiment of Mother Earth, the quintessential mother with infinite sexual life-giving and nurturing reserves. In other words, she is a superwoman. So this is her explaining the superwoman myth. And did she go into more on how it became a mythology? Yeah, she talked about the reality of it in the next page. So she was giving like this metaphor of someone being in a jungle and how there's all these animals and all these structures that confine you into that jungle. And then she said, now I want you to picture a little black girl in a jungle that has no tigers and lions, but poverty, ignorance, welfare centers, tenements, rats, roaches, inadequate schools, malevolence, teachers, pimps, 42nd Streets, 8th Avenue's heroin, hypodermic needles and methadone, opportunistic preachers and community leaders, a narrow range of career possibilities, always impeding pregnancies, sterilization, poor medical services, corrupt lawyers, an insensitive and illogical court system, and 2 races of men who prey upon her as a sexual chattel and a beast of burden. A sexual chattel, the white man, and a beast of burden, black men. And suppose that behind this black girl, there was a whole string of little black girls who had faced this same jungle with their imaginary advantages and been defeated. Would it not be an act of unkindness, of extreme injustice, really, to tell her that she was a woman of special strengths, of exceptional opportunities? And she was talking about how she was with a friend and they were watching the news of this black woman that was overcoming incarceration and had to get away from the ghetto and stuff like that. And her friend was said, that's a strong sister. So Wallace was talking about how that's problematic. And yeah. And she talked about how the Moynihan report was also enhancing the superwoman trope, and why there are greater proportions for black women, and the destabilizing the black community. And she noted those fallacies of why there's this strong black woman trope. And then she talked about Eldridge Cleaver again, and page 117 to 118. So she was talking about this quote that Eldridge Cleaver said in Soul on Ice. He said, there's a war going on between the black man and the black woman, which makes her the silent ally. indirectly but effectively, of the white man. So he's saying black feminism is white supremacy. The black woman is an unconsenting ally and she may not even realize it, but the white man sure does. That's why all down through history he had propped her up economically above you and me to strengthen her hand against us. He was pretty much referencing the Moynihan report too. And she said, was this paranoia on Cleaver's part or short-sightedness that came out of his combined reverence for maleness and his contempt for femaleness? In other words, sexism? Yeah. And it's this idea of there's these ideas of the myth of the strong black woman and the superwoman, but Cleaver's interpretation was problematic. He said the myth of the strong black woman is the other side of the coin of the myth of the beautiful dumb blonde. The white man turned the white woman into a weak-minded, weak-bodied, delicate freak, a sex spot, and placed her on a pedestal. He turned the black woman into a strong, self-reliant Amazon and deposited her into his kitchen. That's the secret of Aunt Jemima's bandana. The rapist said all of this. The white man turned himself into the omnipotent administrator and established himself in the front office, and he turned the black man into the super masculine maniacal and kicked him out into the fields. So don't read Eldridge Cleaver. I recommend y'all to, but I don't know how Michele Wallace was able to read him, but I'm glad that she was able to give critiques. And she said, it didn't seem to strike Cleaver as incongruous that a strong, self-reliant woman would allow herself to be deposited in someone's kitchen. Cleaver, however, could see the white woman's weakness in relation to men quite clearly, and by the way, I think he underestimated the strength and the willfulness in the role she played, just as he overestimated the white man's awareness of his own design. But the black woman who is at the white woman's knees under the black man's heel and gets the back of the white man's hand, he described as an Amazon. Didn't he realize that Amazon meant female warrior? What warrior would have put up with that kind of abuse? So this is when I learned about the stereotype of an Amazon warrior. So it's this black woman warrior, and how that contributes also to the Superwoman myth. And although Cleaver was able to stand back a little from the prevailing mythology and see how black women and men were all manipulated against one another, some combination of male ego and disdain for the black woman superseded his reasoning abilities. She was only useful to him to the extent that she illustrated his own oppression. That was a deep quote. She was only useful to him to the extent that she illustrated his own oppression. That's what a lot of black men, a lot of hoteps believe too, and how they see that black feminism is destroying the black community and not just white supremacy, and knowing that white supremacy is also patriarchal and anti-black feminism. And yeah, so she was also talking about when white feminists and white women, when they were trying to learn the oppression of black women, and it's this liberal white woman that she critiqued in saying how, talking about like, you're amazing, but I'm dying, girl. And she was talking about how there was this white woman who was going into a library, and she was asking like a black library worker who was a man, and the white woman was asking to learn about how the history of rape of black women, and the black man was saying, if you want to learn about rape of black women, you need to learn about lynchings of black men first. So it's this erasure of black women that the white woman was trying to learn, and thinking there should only be a focus of the black man's problems, and not just it was a mess. It was an orchestration, and saying like the only rape that black communities go through is the lynchings that black men go through. And no, it's like black women also go through an astronomical levels of sexual violence, and that's something that that needs to be paid attention to. And she was also talking about there is this idea of black women having power that emasculates the black men, and saying like powerful black femininity is a threat to black masculinity, and how that's not true. Like black masculinity, hyper masculinity is white supremacy. weapon to black feminism and black liberation. And she was talking about this on page 124. I don't know if I marked anything down. Yeah, it said, although the two sides of this argument are contradictory, most black women combine them. That the black woman often sees herself as liberated merely involves an extension of the myth. As for racism being more important than sexism, she is only saying that she can't afford to work on her oppression as a woman because the black man's oppression is greater. So that's how a lot of black women, they internalize misogyny and see racism as the only problem too. I get an image of an Herculean woman who, with one long muscular arm, is holding the dogs that are nipping at her heels at bay, while the other arm, she is helping a fragile, tiny little man over the fence of racism and saying black women should um, um, put away their needs and their suffering in expense of black man's empowerment. So that's something that she went into. And she also talked about this book that she read by Inez Smith Reeves, and these characters that in the book, there was this quote that stuck out to Wallace and said, we have been liberated by slavery. So she was talking about how white feminism, their focus was like on employment and labor and getting into job forces, where black feminism, we're already working. And that if that's your idea of liberation, then we're already liberated by slavery. And she said, but the fact was that the black woman's liberation consisted of being bound to the most unpleasant, unrewarding kind of work that did not enlarge her universe or increase her fulfillment. So black feminism is pretty much enhancing the feminism that's being promoted in the mainstream, that it should go beyond just this employment. You need to be treated like a human being in the process. And yeah, it like expands your politics about because if you learn about black feminism, you have to also learn about black domestic workers and the triple oppression that they go through, because black women, there's also a classism aspect that goes into the suffering that they endure. And yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, so this we're next is the second section of the myth of the Superwoman, and she went into how the Superwoman trope came about and how there was this legend of a black woman slave in a relationship, quote unquote, with a slave master, and the slave master's wife was jealous of the relationship, that the slave master's wife was trying to harm the black woman slave. And then it came to the point where the black woman slave fought off the slave master's wife, and that's like this powerful black woman stereotype came about. And it was from this book. What was the name of it? It was Unwritten History of Slavery, Autobiographical Accounts of Ex-Slaves, Black Women in White America by Gerda Lerner. And that's in the story that was portrayed. That's how the Superwoman narrative came about, and how we became into known today. And she also going back into the importance of reading your history. And she said, to read much of the literature of the Black movement, one would think that whites were simply a demon race of incalculable wealth who came to this country for the express purpose of making a mockery of democracy and subjecting blacks to the basest kinds of torture and abuse. Perhaps for a time in the late 60s, there was a certain usefulness for blacks in claiming a degree of moral superiority for themselves after centuries of an imposed sense of cultural inferiority. Perhaps it was even valid to depict whites as monsters for a brief period by way of compensation for the dashed hopes of the civil rights movement. And before that, she said, it was slavery that gave us the myth of the Superwoman, but the legends of Miss Anne, the Little Eva, Young Massa, and Simon Legree, the Southern Belle, and the evil old mistress of whites in all their mythic helplessness, softness, decadence, cruelty, and perversion are as essential to our notion of the strong black woman as the existence of slavery and the general mythology of the inferiority of blacks. So that's how you learn about um, that's how some people went into quote unquote loving black women because they see them as superheroes. Like, y'all give us black babies and stuff like that. Like, that's the only way we give you value and not just their human experience. And the thing is, they shouldn't have to go through these harmful experiences in order for them to seek your attention. And that's that goes into it. And how she also talked about how American slavery is different from slavery throughout the world, and how American slavery, there's no upward mobility, there's no privilege that goes into other than the privileges that I listed beforehand. But it's like you're literally stuck in this box in slavery. It's literally prison. And how the prison industrial complex is rooted in slavery. Like, you're always stuck in this cycle. You can't level up compared to the other systems of slavery that were in like Arab and Africa and stuff like that. When like you get like when you're a slave, you can upgrade to like other positions. Like, you can go from a slave to a king, literally. And that's and that's how it talks about how America is literally just a system of exploitation. Because she also talks about indentured servants, also how there are white indentured servants also. And how there's this focus on African enslavement, because they see Africans as doing things that the Native Americans and whites couldn't do. And that's how Black Macho and Superwoman, these stereotypes, they became existed today. Like, it's this fetishization of our labor and the capabilities that the Black community can do. And is not tapping into the injustices that we go through, whether that's slavery, mass incarceration in the prison industrial complex, Jim Crow, segregation, convict leasing, redlining, medical racism, sexual racism, all these injustices, environmental racism, and climate crisis, and all these things that put us in this system of oppress. And what else goes into that? She also talked about the slave owner and the slave mistress's dynamics, and how there's a patriarchal operation that goes into it. And it was on page 134 to 135. He said the slave owner's wife's duty was to serve her husband in all things, to keep his house, to wait on him, and to bear his children unceasingly and without complaint. Birth control was virtually non-existent. It was not unusual for a woman to marry at 15, have a dozen children, and die in childbirth in her mid-30s. The husband invariably took another wife after a brief perfunctory period of mourning, often no longer than a month. In this way, a man often had 4 or more wives in his lifetime. So that's the the life of the Southern colonial woman and the Southern belle. Like that's literally how white feminism, like the origins came about. Like, there's this desire to be the oppressor too. And that's literally the difference between white feminism and black feminism. So it's these lenses that are provided that you can see through slavery. And there's these archetypes that black female slaves had to go through, and there's this importance on fertility. So slave masters see the importance of black women slaves specifically because they see they can produce more slaves if they give birth to children and stuff like that. So that leads to like coercion and slave rape and all that stuff. And there's this slave marriage during slavery times. It was like it was like it's not protected by law, but like slave women literally can never have met their slave husbands. So I talked about, I forgot what book I talked about, but the marriages can be arranged through slave masters, and and I think it was Bell Hooks that went into All About Love. Like some people aren't even married to people that they even love because of stuff like slavery and stuff like that. And your spouse could be sold away, and you can be in a relationship with another person while still married to that spouse that was sold away. And how she was also she also went into the lifestyle of slave children. And slave children, they work when they start, and children started being slaves when they were like 12 or something. But I think it's with mulattoes and slave masters because of colorism and stuff like that. There's some privileges, like their children can be free, literally. And what else? There's this story of Harriet Brent Jacobs, who was a slave mother. She never got to see her children until later in life when she became free. How she had to fight to get her children. And that also gets into the superwoman stereotype. And what else? Yeah, so it's like this black women during slavery. There's all these things that they had. There's all these experiences that they go through. All these anecdotes that Wallace provided. And she talked about Charlotte Fortin, who was she became a free woman. Charlotte Fortin and her family, they were advocates of the abolition of slavery, but they were also going into assimilation and integration between black people and white people. So live it together, go to school, the same schools. And she was talking about how there were a lot of abolitionists that didn't want integration. Like some people straight up just want to go back to Africa and just doesn't want to go through the United States, which is also a justified and validated stance to take, because the United States, you can imagine a lot of black intellectuals that left the United States, like Nina Simone, James Baldwin, W.E.B. Du Bois, and all of them, because they're tired of the injustices in the United States specifically, and some of them went back to Africa. So so Charlotte Fortin advocated for integration and stuff like that, but Sojourner Truth was also a known abolitionist and suffragist. So she's talking about black feminism, how it came about with Sojourner Truth, because she was an abolitionist and a suffragist. And Harriet Tubman too. And they talked about the achievements that also led to further silence. So for the 14th Amendment, for example, black men were able to vote, and it was literally like silencing of black women. Like, we're progressing. Don't scare them. Don't scare them with being with more ambitions and desires that you have. Like it's those respectability politics that black men were putting onto black women, because black women, they didn't get to vote until later, much later in life. And then Wallace was talking about navigating the Amazon stereotype and the erasure of black women in movements, because black women, there's like not a movement, not a black movement, and it didn't have black women involved. Like, black women were in the civil rights movement, black women were in black liberation and Black Panther Party. Black women created Black Lives Matter. Black women like they got through they promoted all these social movements. And silencing because you're being too strong is like, what the point anymore? And she also talked about beauty standards and desirability politics that are portrayed, that black women have to succumb to whiteness in order to seek approval for some reason, because of the injustices that they go through. So straightening your hair, lightening your skin, literally. So it's a lot of colorism. And let me see, what page was that? It was at the end of this section. And yeah, yeah, it was page 157 to 158. The black woman had not failed to be aware of America's standard of beauty, nor the fact that she was not included in it. Television and motion pictures had made this information very available to her. She watched as America expanded its ideal to include Irish, Italian, Jewish, even Oriental, and Indian women. America had room among its beauty contestants for the buxom Mae West, the bug eyes of Betty Davis, the masculinity of Joan Crawford, and the black woman was not allowed entry if her hair was straight, her skin light, and her features European. In other words, she was as nearly indistinguishable from a white woman as possible. The black man noticed this too. It was also clear that whether he wished it or not, he was risking his life for his reputed lust for white women. Could he fail to get the message? The black woman had no value. He projected his self-hatred onto her. She reminded him of his oppression, of his mythic inability to assert himself as a man. Even if he allowed himself to be with her, he was reluctant to supply her with the kind of reinforcement and approval she craved. In a thousand little ways, he made it clear to her that he would rather have a Kim Novak. So that's goes into the beauty standards that black women, especially dark skinned and radical black women, have to face and confront. And it's dehumanizing. And yeah, she said the black community had for quite some time been plagued by color discrimination. The upper echelons of black society in particular tended to rate beauty and merit on the basis of the lightness of the skin and straightness of the hair and features. White features were often a more reliable ticket into this society than professional status or higher education. Interestingly enough, there was more true for women than it was for men. So she talked about the misogynoir that enhanced colorism too. And there was another side of the coin. The black woman was not entirely unprejudiced in respect to the black man. The saying "a black man ain't S word," I'm not gonna say it because profanity and stuff like that, was never more popular than in the 50s. We shouldn't, however, forget some other popular sayings of the times. These two things I've never seen: grain snow and an ugly white woman. And there's only one thing a black woman can do for me, and that's to show me where that pretty little white gal went. So talking about the self-hatred and how that is, and how that segued into misogynoir that black men put on black women. And that was it for that section. So the next section is the last section, and that'll be the end of this book. And she talked about the life of Angela Davis and George Jackson and how Angela Davis went through her incarceration, but also campaigned to support for George Jackson, and how Angela Davis had this radical love for George Jackson, like sent letters and stuff like that. And and I think Wallace was saying there were some romantic sentiments that were going on between Angela Davis and George Jackson, which I believe wasn't the case, because Angela Davis is a lesbian. And I think and she might sense like she might have like a radical compassion that she was putting on for George. But it was a tumultuous and hard time in that movement with the Soledad brothers, if y'all read into that. And she was talking about all these black women figures, not just Angela Davis, but also Nikki Giovanni and Eartha Kitt. And there's all these experiences of black women. Like, black women aren't a monolith, just like black people aren't a monolith. Like, black women have all these experiences that enhance their politics, and they all have these experiences for their pleasure, for the sake of their pleasure. So that's literally what she went into that section. And she also tried to make black women reevaluate their purpose, and it doesn't involve marriage, children, and a career. And she talked about this on pages 174 to 175. And oh no, it was just 175. She said, I think that the black woman thinks of her history and her condition as a wound which makes her different and therefore special and therefore exempt from human responsibility. The impartial observer may look at her and see a beautiful, healthy, glowing, vigorous woman, but none of that matters. What matters is what she feels inside. And what she feels inside is powerless. She feels powerless to do anything about her condition or anyone else's. Her solution is to simply not participate or to participate on her own very limited basis. Like black women have to go through so much that there's this inner work that they didn't have the opportunity to do. Like they don't think about their pleasures, their self pleasures, because of what society says, puts this values that society says black women have, that you can only be married, you can only have children, and you can only have a career, and then you're gone. But Michele Wallace is wants you to tap into, um, if you want to be married, you want to have children and have a career, that's cool. But also think about your community and what you in the community within yourself. Talk about your pleasures, because you can have marriage, you can have kids, and you can have a career and still be unhappy. So she wants black women to be happy, and it doesn't have to. And we're trying to think of pleasure beyond oppression, which Adrienne Marie Brown was talking about in pleasure activism, and being in tune with your inner self. And at the end, we're at the end. So she was talking about, it was this good quote at the end of the book. She said, lately I've noticed the appearance of a number of black women's organizations and conferences, because black feminism was being um in the mainstream. Like she made the National Black Feminist Organization, and the Combahee River Collective was around, and other black women organizations. She said the middle class black woman in particular is beginning to address herself to feminist issues, but everything I've seen so far has been an imitation of what white feminists have done before. I now hear students refer casually to a black women's movement, but I haven't seen black women make any meaningful attempt to differentiate between their problems and the problems of white women. And most important, there seems to be no awareness of how black women have been duped by the myth of the superwoman. Some black women have come together because they can't find husbands. Some are angry with their boyfriends. The lesbians are looking for a public reform for their sexual preference. Others notice that if one follows in the footsteps of the white feminists, a lucrative position or promotion may come up before long. These women have trouble agreeing on the things, and I think that's okay. Like if there's experience that led you to a black feminist politic, like it's validated. You see like there's a segue to the liberation of all people. And you see how the white supremacist power structure has damaged you and the black community, black people, and yourself. And their organizations break up quickly, and yet more keep forming. Every now and then, someone still mentions that white women are going to rip them off if they join the women's movement. That is, white women will use their support to make gains and then not share with the black woman. Like intersectionality and identity politics, as we know it today, white feminists somehow use these things that were coined by black feminism to their benefit. And they talked about intersectionality when it comes to participating in oppression, rather than it's against these oppressions. And unfortunately, this is probably true. It would be true of any movement the black woman joined in her present condition. That is, without some clear understanding of her priorities. The black woman needs an analysis. She belongs to the only group in this country which has not asserted its identity. So not just tapping into racism and misogyny, but also queer antagonism and classism and all these other systems of oppression. And that's what black feminism was able to highlight. Early in 1978, there was a series of articles in the New York Times on the changes in the black community since 1968. It covered the civil rights movement, the black movement, the economic and social situation for blacks today. Never once did it mention the contribution black women made to the civil rights movement. The article spoke of three Americas: one white, one middle-class black, one poor black. No particular notice was given to the fact that poor Black America consists largely of Black women and children. It was as if these women and children did not exist. And finally, the history of the period has been written and will continue to be written without us. The imperative is clear. Either we will make history or remain the victims of it. So she was talking about how it's important to learn from history, getting into the authenticity of the history, and writing the true history and presenting that to others, and importance it is to research and give political education to others to make sense of the world. And it's important to have visions and having a radical imagination and creating futures. So that's the importance of people like Octavia Butler, who's known for Afrofuturism, and trying to liberate ourselves within systems of oppression, and how we can liberate our communities and getting rid of the systems of oppression. So it's important to thinking about the future and generations to come and carry on the revolution, and make sure people don't have to suffer through the same things that you're going through presently and especially in the past. So, that's it, y'all. That's Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. I highly recommend this text. It was controversial within the Black feminist spaces, too. I think Angela Davis provides some critiques, but this is like a very important book that went into Black feminism throughout the 70s, and it's goes. It was probably one of the an early anti-respectability politics book, also anti-capitalism, and promotes communist and socialist ideals. And yeah, so thank y'all. This is probably gonna be this is the first in the Black feminism and womanism playlist that I'm gonna make. And make sure y'all follow my reading list on at Raisin Souls on Instagram. I'm gonna put it in the description box below. And follow my personal Instagram at Intellectual Albert. And I should say this: make sure y'all subscribe for the content. I'm excited for what I'll be reading next, and make sure y'all take care, stay safe, and stay blessed and Black. And yeah, I'm excited for what I'm gonna read. And yeah, get into Michele Wallace. Make sure you learn about her. She's not too known, but she is known. Like, she's in speaking engagements, but I wish she got the attention that she deserves with this book, because it was like one of the because I looked her up and I saw her through a documentary, and I said, this woman knows some things. And I learned about her. I had to search for myself to learn about her and this book. So make sure you study Michele Wallace, and yeah, make sure you study Black feminism, Black radical feminism especially. Make sure you study and apply and practice. And yeah, thanks for staying with me for this video, and make sure y'all take care, and make sure you tap into Black feminism and how you get pleasure through Black feminism politics, and make sure you get your pleasure through trying to reach liberation. And okay, see y'all.